sometimes the person you look down on is the one standing far above you in heart. The morning sunlight streamed through the 23rd floor windows of Hart Industries, glinting off the glass walls and polished chrome desks. CEO Evelyn Hart, the youngest self-made billionaire in the city, sat in her corner office surrounded by people who feared her more than they respected her. Her tone was sharp, her eyes cold, and her smile, when it appeared, usually came at someone else's expense. She had built her empire from nothing, or so she believed. To her, weakness was failure, and failure was unforgivable. That morning, her computer froze during an important presentation, and instead of calling IT, she decided to make a joke. "Hey, janitor," she called across the room, her voice dripping with mockery. "Maybe you can fix my computer too?" Laughter erupted from her staff, echoing off the glass like a cruel chorus. The man she addressed was Mr. Cole, the building's janitor. In his late 50s, with gray hair and kind eyes that carried a quiet sadness, he was invisible to most. He had been sweeping near the conference room, trying to keep out of sight. When Evelyn called him, he looked up, smiled gently, and walked over without hesitation. His hands were rough from years of hard work, but steady and calm. Without a word, he leaned over her desk, tapped a few keys, adjusted a connection under the desk, and within moments, the screen flickered back to life. The laughter stopped. Evelyn blinked in surprise, suddenly aware of how small her joke felt. Thank you," she muttered awkwardly, her confidence faltering for the first time that day. Mr. Cole nodded with that same quiet smile. "No problem, ma'am. Just needed a little care," he said softly, and began to turn away. As he did, something caught Evelyn's eye, a small photograph clipped to his ID badge. It showed a young girl, perhaps 12 or 13, lying in a hospital bed, her smile weak but full of light. Evelyn's voice softened instinctively. "Your daughter?" she asked, surprising even herself. Mr. Cole paused, looking down at the photo with tender pride. "Yes," he said, "that's Lily. She's fighting leukemia. Every hour I work here helps pay for her treatment." Then, with a polite nod, he continued mopping the floor, leaving Evelyn frozen in silence. For the rest of the day, Evelyn couldn't concentrate. The words echoed in her head. Every hour I work here helps pay for her treatment. She couldn't shake the image of that photo, of his steady hands and the faint tremor in his voice. That night, when everyone had gone home, she stayed behind, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. She had everything: wealth, power, influence. But she couldn't remember the last time she had felt compassion. Her father had once been a factory worker too, before she built her empire. He had sacrificed everything for her education, working double shifts to pay her tuition. And yet, she had spent years mocking people just like him. The next morning, Evelyn came in early. The halls were quiet, and the faint sound of a mop swishing against the marble floors echoed softly. Mr. Cole was there, cleaning before anyone else arrived. She approached him hesitantly. "Good morning, Mr. Cole," she said, her tone uncharacteristically gentle. He looked up, surprised, then smiled. "Morning, ma'am." Evelyn handed him a cup of coffee. "For you," she said. He blinked, clearly unsure how to respond. "Thank you, that's kind of you." For the first time, Evelyn smiled without pride. They spoke briefly about his daughter's treatments, the costs, and how he often skipped meals to afford her medicine. Every word cut deeper into Evelyn's heart, peeling away layers of arrogance she didn't know she carried. Later that day, Evelyn decided to visit the hospital listed on his badge. She walked through sterile hallways until she found the room. Inside, Lily lay hooked to tubes, her smile lighting up the space despite her frail frame. "Your daddy's boss?" she asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. Evelyn nodded, sitting beside her. "Yes, I am. Your dad talks about you a lot." Lily giggled softly. "He says you're very smart but too serious. He says one day you'll laugh for real." The innocence in her voice broke Evelyn completely. For the first time in years, tears welled in her eyes. That evening, Evelyn returned to her penthouse, unable to sleep. She stared at the city lights below, thinking of the people who made her world run. The janitors, the drivers, the secretaries, all invisible gears turning the grand machine of her success. The next morning, she contacted the hospital's billing office and quietly paid off Lily's remaining treatment balance, leaving the donor line anonymous. She didn't want praise. She only wanted to do something right for once. A few weeks passed. One morning when Evelyn arrived at the office, Mr. Cole was gone. His locker was empty, and on her desk lay an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. "Dear Ms. Hart, thank you for reminding me that kindness still exists. Lily is recovering well and will be moving closer to family soon. You may never know what your gesture meant to us, but please know you changed more than one life. You changed mine. With gratitude, Mr. Cole." Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes. She looked out across her office floor, realizing how hollow her life had been. From that day, things began to change. The laughter in her company no longer came from mockery. It came from warmth. Evelyn started a scholarship program for employees' families and raised the wages of all janitorial and maintenance staff. When people asked why, she simply said, "Because I finally learned who truly keeps this company running." Months later, as Evelyn walked through the building one evening, she passed a new janitor sweeping near her office. He smiled politely and wished her a good night. For a moment, she saw Mr. Cole in his eyes, the quiet strength, the dignity, the unspoken courage. She smiled back and said, "Good night, and thank you for all you do." That night, standing alone in her office, Evelyn looked at her reflection once more. She no longer saw the cold CEO who thrived on ego. She saw a woman who had finally learned the meaning of respect, compassion, and humility. Sometimes, she thought, the greatest teachers wear no suits, hold no degrees, and seek no recognition. They just keep showing up, doing their best, carrying more love than the world ever sees. And in that realization, Evelyn found something her billions could never buy: peace. The next morning, the building felt strangely hollow. Evelyn arrived earlier than usual, her heels echoing against the marble floors. The janitor's cart wasn't in its usual corner, and the faint hum of Mr. Cole's radio, something she'd subconsciously grown used to, was missing. She frowned and walked toward the maintenance hall. His locker stood open, cleaned out completely. Inside was a folded uniform, a small keychain, and a letter with her name written carefully across the front. She unfolded it slowly, expecting a complaint or a request. Instead, she found just a few words: "Thank you for reminding me kindness still matters." Evelyn stared at the note, her chest tightening in a way she didn't understand. There was no anger, no guilt, only a quiet ache, as though something important had slipped through her fingers. She closed the locker and stood there longer than she should have, the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the silence. By the afternoon, she had learned from HR that Mr. Cole had resigned without notice. No one knew where he'd gone. Work felt heavier that day, the boardroom chatter blurred, and even her reflection in the glass walls seemed foreign. She tried to shake the feeling off, but when she saw his empty space near the janitor's closet again that evening, she stopped pretending it didn't bother her. Something in her wanted to know why a man with nothing could still smile like he did. The next day, she found the hospital address on the back of the note. Small, neat handwriting. She didn't tell her driver where they were going until she was already inside the car. "St. Francis Memorial," she said, staring out the window. The hospital was simple, quiet, with white walls that smelled faintly of disinfectant and hope. Evelyn approached the front desk, feeling out of place in her expensive heels and silk coat. "I'm here to see Lily Cole," she said softly. The nurse smiled. "Room 312, she's a bright one." Evelyn hesitated at the door before knocking. Inside, the room was filled with warm light from a small window. A thin girl sat up in bed, drawing on a sketch pad. When she looked up, Evelyn saw the same gentle eyes as her father's. "You must be one of Dad's work friends," the girl said brightly. "He told me about you." Evelyn managed a small smile. "Yes, I work with him." Lily nodded eagerly. "He says you're the boss. He says you're really smart but always look sad." Like you forgot how to laugh. Evelyn blinked, unsure how to respond. He said that? The girl giggled. He tells me stories about everyone at his job. He says everyone's important, even if people forget to notice. They spoke for a while, about school, about the drawings Lily made to cheer up other kids. Evelyn noticed the small things, the faded edges of the blanket, the stack of unpaid hospital bills half hidden under a clipboard. When Lily mentioned that her dad had sold his truck because we didn't need it anymore, Evelyn felt her throat tighten. She wanted to say something comforting, something meaningful, but the words wouldn't come. When she left the hospital, the world outside felt too bright. She sat in her car for a long time, thinking of her own father, how he'd once worked late nights fixing machines, his hands raw and tired so she could go to college. She had buried those memories under layers of ambition, telling herself success meant never being that vulnerable again. Now, a janitor's quiet dignity had forced those walls to crack. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. The city lights flickered through her windows, but they didn't feel powerful anymore. They felt distant. She opened her laptop and searched the hospital's donation system. Without hesitation, she arranged a full payment for Lily's treatment. But this time, she didn't do it to feel noble. She did it because she couldn't stand the thought of a man selling pieces of his life just to keep his child breathing. She entered her name only where required for billing. No publicity, no press. Then she shut her laptop and sat in silence, realizing it was the first thing she'd done in years that actually mattered. Weeks passed. Work continued, but Evelyn wasn't the same. The staff noticed she no longer snapped during meetings. She listened more, spoke less, even joined the employees for lunch sometimes. At first, they assumed it was a phase. But one morning, she called a full staff meeting. "We're launching a new program," she announced. "Healthcare coverage for every employee, full coverage, no exceptions." The room went silent. Someone started clapping, hesitant at first, then louder. Evelyn didn't smile for applause. She just felt a quiet sense of rightness, like a balance restored. One evening, months later, Evelyn was reviewing reports when her assistant buzzed in. "There's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." She frowned, distracted. "Who is it?" "He says his name is Cole." For a second, Evelyn froze. She stood up and walked out before she could think twice. When she reached the lobby, Mr. Cole was there, older, thinner, but standing tall. He looked surprised to see her. "I didn't expect you'd remember me," he said with a shy smile. Evelyn's voice was softer than she remembered it ever being. "I could never forget." He thanked her for letting him work at the company, for treating him with respect in those final days. "Lily's better now," he said, eyes glistening. "She's painting again. Doctors say the cancer's gone. Someone paid for everything, though they wouldn't tell me who." Evelyn's heart pounded, but she only smiled faintly. "That's wonderful news." Cole hesitated. "I just wanted to say, whoever did that saved her life. I'll spend the rest of mine trying to deserve it." He extended his hand. She shook it gently and whispered, "No more jokes, only respect." He left soon after, walking into the afternoon light. Evelyn stood at the glass doors, watching him fade into the crowd. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. The silence inside her wasn't emptiness anymore. It was peace. That night, when she returned to her penthouse, she didn't turn on the lights. She walked to the window, looking down at the same city she used to see as a battlefield. Now, it looked like something fragile, something worth protecting. On her kitchen counter sat the old note she'd kept. "Thank you for reminding me kindness still matters." She smiled, folded it carefully, and slipped it into her planner, not as a reminder of guilt, but of grace. From that day on, Evelyn's company changed. She quietly funded scholarships for employees' children, created programs for single parents, and worked behind the scenes to make sure no one in her building ever went unnoticed again. People whispered that success had softened her, but the truth was simpler. Success had finally met its purpose. And though she never told anyone what happened between her and the janitor sometimes, late at night, she'd think of him and his daughter, Two lives intertwined with hers by a moment of unintended cruelty turned into compassion. In those moments, she realized that redemption isn't a grand act or a headline. It's the quiet choice to see people, truly see them, and choose kindness even when no one's watching. For the first time, Evelyn Hart understood that the richest hearts are often found in the humblest hands.